Well, welcome everyone. I'm Father Peter Abdallah, a Paulist priest, and for the last 12 years, a director of the University Catholic Center here at UCLA that's over on Gailey Avenue. On behalf of all of us in the many sponsoring organizations at UCLA who bring Father Greg Boyle here to campus tonight, I want to express how very, very pleased and grateful we are that you all could take time and be here with us for this evening. It makes it worthwhile to partially see all of you. Musing about the next 4 years politically, a favorite theology professor from my seminary days recently reminded me of the chorus from an old Leonard Cohen song called Anthem. Leonard Cohen, songwriter, poet, author, activist. Many of you will know the song Hallelujah. He died in November. The anthem chorus goes, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." As the founder and executive director of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the United States, our speaker tonight has been making cracks to let in light and grace here in LA for more than 30 years. Father Greg Boyle is a native Angelino and also a Jesuit priest. He was transformed by his work in Bolivia, Mexico, and Folsom Prison with those who live at the margins, and is dedicated to finding a place for all in our society. Nearly 30 years ago in Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles, he served for 6 years as pastor of Dolores Mission Church, then the poorest parish in the city. There he started what would become Homeboy Industries. Now located in downtown Los Angeles, just across from Chinatown, Homeboy provides a real path to change and free critical services to the 12,000 people who come through its doors every year seeking a better life. Homeboy's approach is now a model for organizations around the world. Father Greg has received numerous honorary degrees, awards, recognitions for his work. He serves on multiple national and state boards, including the National Task Force on Children Exposed to Violence, the National Gang Center Advisory Board, and the California Commission for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. He regularly consults with youth service agencies, policymakers, and employers. His first book, which I'm holding, Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion, is a New York Times bestseller and Publishers Weekly Best Book of 2010. We'll have copies available tonight afterwards for purchase, and Father Greg will do a book signing after his talk and Q&A tonight. Father Greg, it's great to be able to welcome you back to UCLA, my friend. Take it away. Y vaya con Dios siempre.
Normally do this chair thing, but the chair was here, so there's a podium. It was kind of nice. It feels, since I can't see any of you, it feels like I'm just sitting at home talking to myself. Thank you, Peter. It's always great to be with you, and so I've spoken here over the years, The great privilege for me this evening was coming here with my compadre, Angel Cabral, who I haven't spent this much time with in a long time, because he was gone for a while. I've known him for 30 years. And the day won't ever come when I have more courage than him, or I am more noble than he is, or I am closer to God than he is. So in the 5 hours that it took us to drive from East LA, it was really a joy to catch up. And he told me stories that I just don't remember. Oh my God. So back in the day when I didn't have gray hairs, before Angel gave them to me. But it was great to catch up. And so it's the privilege of my life for 30 years to have worked with gang members, and they've taught me everything of value. People like a guy named Lewis who helped run the place at Homeboy, and and is a good speaker. You know, I remember years ago, he had, was giving me tips on how to speak publicly, and he said, you know, you have to pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. And I said, yeah, no shit. That's some good advice there. Well, thanks for your attention. You know, it's hard at the end of the day. You know, we've all had long days today. Mine started really early, and all you guys have had a life all day long today. So attention is kind of nice. You know, folks on the margins are just hoping for a little bit of attention. I had a very earnest 16-year-old gang member stand in front of my desk, and he said, "Look, I need your divided attention." And I said, well, you are in luck, because that is exactly what you'll be getting today. So the margins, you know, I think that's the truth of our life, is that we're invited out to them, because if you go to the margins, look under your feet. You know, the margins are getting erased because you chose to stand there. And so you imagine a circle of compassion, and you imagine nobody standing outside that circle, and to that end, you seek to dismantle the barriers that exclude. So you inch your way out to the margins, not to rescue anybody, but if you go out to the margins, watch what happens. Everyone gets rescued. So you stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. You stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. You stand with those whose dignity has been denied. You stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. You stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And you try to create something different, a community of kinship, such that God, in fact, might recognize it. A place of tenderness, where people are held, and the tenderness is something they can hold on to. You know, I don't know how much God I can talk about here, but I feel like it's sort of, you know, you're doomed to imitate the kind of God you believe in. If your God is puny and tiny and exacting and wags his or her finger at you, then you won't be able to help yourself. You'll be like that. But, you know, we need a better God than the one we have. You know, we have a tiny one. A God created in our own image rather than the other way around. An expansive, spacious God. The true God, of course, is the one who loves us without measure and without regret. The one who just can't take his eyes off of us. That's the truth. But it's difficult sometimes because we settle for a partial God. And that's what gets us into trouble. That's how we don't find our way out to the margins, to the place of exquisite mutuality. You know, the homies are always kind of mangling the English language, not just in a charming, hilarious way, but in an illuminating way, too. There was a homegirl named Lisa at the end of the day. She's a trainee at Homeboy Industries. She came, she wanted to introduce her man to me, and before she went home, and she said, "This is my sufficient other." I said, "No doubt." You know, I don't, somebody was asking me earlier, a reporter here was asking me about running the place. And I said, well, I don't really run it anymore. I have a CEO, Tom Bosso, who's great. And so it's a $19 million annual operation. So it's nice not to have to worry about the day-to-day stuff. And he does, you know. So I had a homie come into my office. He said, "Damn, G, my lady, she's in a bad mood today." And I said, "Why?" "Well, you know, she's beginning her administration period." And I said, "Well, I just finished mine, so I kind of know what she's going through." But my favorite one happened when I was saying Mass at San Fernando Juvenile Hall in Sylmar, and big gym with about 300 kids in it, gang members, minors, waiting to settle their cases, I guess. And about 300 of them, and I'm sitting like this in a folding chair, and I'm vested, my album, my stole, and they have these little hojas, these sheets that have English and Spanish of the readings. And sometimes when you're presiding, you think, well, I'm going to close my eyes and listen to the word being proclaimed. So I close my eyes and I put the sheet on my lap, and a homie gets up, and I guess he's doing the psalm, and with sort of an overabundance of confidence, he says, "The Lord is exhausted." And I said, "What the hell?" And it said, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. I mean, who wants to spend eternity with a God who is that needy, who sort of needs to be exalted? I like this exhausted God of which he speaks so highly. The one who sort of extends himself in our direction is totally focused, too busy loving us to have any time to be disappointed. And I think, I don't know what is the issue. We just, we have the hardest time. I directed a retreat this weekend, and people who were grown and still struggle with, is God eternally disappointed in me? Have I let him down? Have I done enough? Do I measure up? And you go, I just think God doesn't know what the heck you're talking about. God says, "You are my beloved in whom I'm wonderfully pleased." And I'm sorry, how have I disappointed you? How does that happen? How do we get the wrong message only all over the place at every single time? It's a little bit like that, the autocorrect thing, where you, the message, it just doesn't come through. I text a lot, and one of the homies, a homegirl actually texted me on a Sunday, and she said, "Where are you at?" And I said, I texted back, "I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas," and monjas is nuns, sisters, religious women, in Spanish. "I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas," and I pushed send. And autocorrect told her that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas. Which she thought, was pretty interesting. Every day the homies, their hair is on fire because they need to pay this bill and a ticket, and they're going to cut off their lights or whatever it is. So a homie had his hair on fire, and he needed a certain amount of money to finish off his rent, and I didn't have it. So I wrote simply, "Things are tight," and I pushed send. Autocorrect told him, "Thongs are tight." And he wrote me back, "I'm sorry to hear that. What about my rent?" And yet we're kind of called to sort of know the truth about our God, that God is compassionate, loving kindness, and all we're called to do is to be in the world who God is. And then everything changes. But our God is too puny, is too tiny. St. Ignatius of Loyola, I'm a Jesuit, always talked about the God is always greater. The minute you can lock onto that, you know that it's about standing out at the margins and to be as expansive, spacious, oceanic, generous, and as exhausted as our God is. And you stand there and you brace yourselves because people will accuse you of wasting your time. The prophet Jeremiah writes, "In this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And so you make those voices heard. But there isn't this great distance, that separates you from folks on the margins. When you stand on the margins, you don't feel superior to the folks there. You recognize your own woundedness in the wounds of the world. It's not supposed to be service provider, service recipient, you know. At Homeboy Industries, I'm not the great healer, and that gang member over there is in need of my exquisite healing. The truth is, we're all a cry for help. We're all in need of healing. It's one of the things that joins us together as members of the human family. But you want to get to kinship, where there's a sense of connection and the mutuality is exquisite, where there is no us and them, where there's just us. Mother Teresa said that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? And so you go to the margins not to rescue anybody, but to experience your own rescue in this exquisite mutuality where there is no daylight that separates you. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend. And best listener I've ever known in my life. If you were talking to him, nobody else existed. It was laser beam focused. He never took his eyes off of you. He was never looking over your shoulder to see if someone more important was on the approach. But once famously, a reporter had commented to him and said, "Wow, these farm workers, they sure love you." And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, "The feeling's mutual," which of course is the hope when we go to the margins, is that it's all about mutuality. Where we don't think we're saving anybody. Saving lives is for the Coast Guard. You go there to have your life saved. I remember there was a homie, everybody called him Dreamer, and nobody found more job opportunities through our organization than this guy. He's in his 40s now, about your age, Angel, I think, but he was, in his early 20s, he was a knucklehead, he was a yo-yo, he was in and out of being locked up all the time. You know, I knew him from the projects, he got into a gang at a young age, and but in his early 20s, you know, I'd find him a job in one of our businesses or in the private sector, and then he'd always sort of gravitate back to vague criminality, usually something involving drugs, the sale of or the use of, and then he'd wander back to me. So this was a constant pattern. A very smart kid, though I don't recall that he ever went to school, now that I think of it, but had a dangerous sense of humor that I always loved. And so this one time he had finished about a 4-month stretch of probation violation in the county jail, and here he is sitting in front of my desk. And so he says what gang members often say, "This time it'll be different." And I go, all right. So with him sitting there for the umpteenth time, I call a friend I knew who ran a vending machine company in Alhambra, and he had hired homies in the past. I'm thinking maybe he'll do it again. And sure enough, he says, yeah, tell him he can start tomorrow. That's a holy man right there. So Dreamer began work at the vending machine company the next day. Well, 2 weeks later, he shows up in my office, and he's sitting in front of my desk. I can't even believe it. I said, "Are you kidding me? Híjole, Madre Santa." Here we go all over again. And I'm a little exasperated, and then he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out his very first paycheck and he waves it proudly. And he says, "Damn, gee, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my mom, she's proud of me. My kids, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job." And I said, "Well, gosh, who?" And he looked at me strangely and he said, "Well, God, of course." "Oh, no, gosh. No, that's right. That would be God." You thought I was going to say you. I said, "No, gosh. God's number one." He said, "You are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days." I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, "Yeah, because God would have been had struck down your ass already by now. But the only thing I recall was we just howled, we fell out of our chairs. And I defy you to identify exactly who's the service provider and who's the service recipient. It's mutual. So Homeboy Industries was born a long time ago in 1988 when I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission. Little tiny parish nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, they comprised the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other when I drove up, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity anywhere in the world was my parish, which I didn't know. And so I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988. And I buried my 218th 2 weeks ago. Not all from that community, but I run a large gang intervention program. So I get asked to do this. First thing we did was we started a school because there were so many junior, middle school age gang members who were given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. And they were wreaking havoc, because they weren't in school. So they were writing on the walls and selling drugs and violence. So I walked out to them and I'd kind of isolate them and I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. So right across the street from the church is our elementary school, parochial school, K to 8, first 2 floors. But the entire 3rd floor of this building was the convent where the ninjas lived. And, so I went up there and I gathered all the nuns in the living room and I sat them down and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And they said, sure. I mean, literally, that was their whole discernment process. And so we were off and running, and so gang members came in large numbers to our school, on the church property. They didn't exactly come to church services, but it created kind of a disconnect because the parishioners started saying, wait a minute, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? Good people in, bad people out. So that was a tough challenge. And then the gang members said, if only we had jobs. So myself and the women, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects, trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that wasn't so forthcoming. So we couldn't wait. So we did stuff. We invented crews, maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build the child care center, a graffiti removal crew, all enemy rival gang members, about 60 of them at one point, working side by side. So the unrest happened in 1992 after the Rodney King verdict unrest, and the whole city exploded like I've never seen it happen before. And but not our parish, not the projects, which seemed odd to people like the LA Times. They came and said, why did this place explode? So they asked me, and I said, well, I think it's because we had 60 strategically hired rival enemy gang members working side by side. So they were invested. They had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before. And above all, a reason not to torch the place. So a movie producer the next day read this in the LA Times, a guy named Ray Stark. And he had $500 million. Not to give me, but he apparently owned that much. And so he invited me summoned me. And he said, what would you like me to do? And I said, well, I don't know. How about you could buy this abandoned bakery across the street, the catty corner from the church, and it has ovens. So, we could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members, and they could bake bread, and we could call it Homeboy Bakery. And that was the extent of my business plan. And he said, sure. So we were off and running. I mean, it was kind of incredible. And a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for a Future to Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this. And not everything worked. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And nobody ever intends to do such a thing. People walk into our headquarters and they go, how did you think this up? And you don't, you evolve, you back your way into stuff. And now we're the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors trying to reimagine their lives and redirect them. And so the centerpiece is our 18-month training program. Everybody wants to get in that. And therapy, case management, curricular things like anger management and GED. We still have a school. Tattoo removal, no place on the planet removes more tattoos than we do. Designated clinic, 3 laser machines, 1 physician assistant who we pay, but like 47 volunteer doctors. So it's pretty much every day, 9 to 5. And it was all started just because you listen, because of a guy named Frank who was 2 days out of Corcoran State Prison and sitting in front of my desk. I'd never met him before, and tattooed on his forehead like a damn billboard filling the entire space. And pardon my French, it said, "Fuck the world," filling the whole damn space. And he looked at me and he said, I am having a hard time finding a job. And I said, well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together. So naturally, I hired him, and he bagged bread for a couple of years. And I found a doctor at White Memorial Hospital who had a laser machine, and he donated 1 hour a month to chip away at Frank's forehead and a few others. And so before too long, we had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members. So we couldn't really stay with that arrangement. Parentheses, Frank is now a security guard at a movie studio in Hollywood, and there is no trace anymore of the angriest, dumbest thing he had ever done. Proving, as Sister Helen Pridgeon often says, we're all a whole lot more than the worst things we've ever done. So we have all our social enterprises. I don't know what our number is at this point. We have Homeboy Bakery and Homeboy homegrown merchandise where we sell our logo stuff. Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall. We have a restaurant at American Airlines Terminal 4. We have a thing called Homeboy Grocery, which is chips and salsas and all the Ralphs from San Luis Obispo to San Diego. I guess there's a magazine, I think it's called Valley. So we were just voted the best salsa in the Valley. Thank you very much. I've never actually said that publicly, but they just showed this to me the other day. So. And what else do we got? Farmers markets. And we have Homeboy Recycling, where we do, recycling, e-recycling, or what do you call that? Yeah, there you go, e-waste. Thank you very much. Just such a terrific spokesman for this social enterprise. I don't even know how to say it. But anyway, that just started. So, and then Homegrown Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. So it's kind of a who's who, people from everywhere. If you go there, you're always going to run into somebody, an elected official or movie star. Jim Carrey has been there a few times, and Jack Black, and Famously, Diane Keaton showed up once for lunch with a regular, a guy who's there all the time. And her waitress is Glenda. And Glenda's a big girl, been there, done that, tattooed, gang member, felon, parolee. She has no clue who Diane Keaton is. And so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, well, what do you recommend? And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes. And Diane Keaton says, well, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And then for some reason it dawns on Glenda right at that moment. She goes, wait a minute. I feel like I've met you before, like I know you. And Diane Keaton decides to deflect it humbly. Oh gosh, I don't know, I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before. And then Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. Yeah, well, that just took my breath away. I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now. But suddenly, Kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And we need go no further than hearing Jesus speak to the gathered, that you may be one. I suppose he could have said more about himself, but it's really about us. It's about our own connection and our own kinship. We're all called to be enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. At Homeboy, we're a little bit allergic to the notion of measuring, holding the bar up and asking the homies to measure up. Mainly because our God doesn't do it. Why would we do it? We like more to kind of hold the mirror up and tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth is a gang member's truth, it's all the same truth, and here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch folks on the margins as they become that truth, as they inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it, no 4 prison walls can keep it out, death can't touch it because it's huge. But part of the task always is to reach in and to dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep folks from seeing their truth. And where we want to be in the end, because the principal suffering of the poor throughout history is shame and disgrace. You want to somehow have a different stance, like the Acts of the Apostles says very curiously, and awe came upon everyone. That it would seem that the measure of our health as a community may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So there I am, I've been invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia. I always say yes to stuff, and then later on I kind of look at it. And so I'm looking at the letter and the not so fine print. I knew it was an all-day conference, an in-service for social workers from 9 to 5. I figure I'm gonna do the keynote, the beginning, maybe lunch, end it. So I'm looking to see what they want me to do. Oh, I am to be the only speaker from 9 to 5. You know, I go, well, that's probably good to know. And so immediately I called 2 homies, Andre and Jose, trainees at Homeboy, and they sit in front of me and I said, look, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. But I'd never heard their stories, and Jose at the time was about 25 years old, and was a trainee, but he had worked his way through our different phases and became a very valued member of our substance abuse team. A man solid now in his recovery, but had a period in his life where, gang member, tattooed, been to prison, felon. but also had a long stretch as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. I never heard a story, and he gets up and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. And we really, honest to God, went from gasp to laugh, and we got whiplash. I think I was 9, he says, when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walks me up to an orphanage. She knocks on the door, and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me. And my grandmother came and rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. First t-shirt, you could see the blood. Second t-shirt, it was still seeping through. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. The kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion. And he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our service, the measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them, in mutual, exquisite connection. Because if we don't make friends with our own wounds, then we may well be tempted to despise the wounded. We'll end with this story and then ask some questions. I've been thinking lately, especially when you kind of think about the kind of God we have, you know, what kind of praise does God have any interest in? You know, it occurs sometimes to universities, to force their students to read my book against their will. And I'm not complaining. But my alma mater, Gonzaga University in Spokane, undefeated basketball team, and they forced their freshmen to read my book, Tattoos on the Heart. So they said, please come up and address everybody, and we'll have a big crowd, and bring 2 homies with you. And I always do if they ask if they're going to pay for them, and so I always pick homies the same way from among our trainees. I always pick enemies. guys who used to shoot at each other, just so that they'll share a hotel room just to mess with them, you know. And I always bring homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing a gang member panicked in the sky. So I've done this so many times, and so I invited Bobby, an African-American gang member at the time, worked in the bakery, and Mario, who at the time worked in our merchandise store. I've done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times with men and women, and I've never picked anybody like Mario, who was more terrified of flying. Of course, you don't know this until the day that you're actually doing it. And so, I mean, he was so terrified. He was hyperventilating, you know, hey, hey, and we hadn't even gotten on the plane yet. So we're at Burbank Airport, and it's a, you know, tiny airport if you haven't flown there, and it's big bay windows, Southwest Airlines mainly. But the main feature is they don't have that hermetically sealed chute to get on the plane. You go out onto the tarmac, and they have the two stairs, you know, like you're the president. And so you climb up the stairs at the front of the plane, and the big feature at Burbank is they have stairs at the back of the plane as well. So I'm sitting there with Mario, and it's early morning, so our plane that we're going to be our plane arrives, and they're deboarding or unboarding or whatever the word is, and deplaning. I don't know. Anyway, and I said, Mario, that's our plane. And I go, oh my God, you may well die before we climb up those damn stairs. So I see two flight attendants, females, and they both have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and it's early morning, and the two of them are schlepping up those front steps, you know, to get onto the plane. And Mario goes, when are we going to board the plane? And I go, as soon as they sober up the pilots. There they go now. All right, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So you know, might say, and this is saying something, that Mario is probably the most tattooed individual who's ever worked at Homeboy. So in 30 years, that's really saying a lot. He's all sleeved out, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, unbelievable. And I'd never been in public with him, you know, and so, you know, we'd be walking through Burbank Airport, and people are like this. Mothers are clutching their kids a little more closely. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, you know, if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow and ask anybody there, who's the most gentle, kind, tender soul? Here, they won't say me. They'll say, oh, Mario. Yeah, Mario. He's the most tender, gentle soul at Homeboy Industries. Though the packaging, I suppose, might suggest otherwise. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any shot at changing that world. So we get to Gonzaga, and this always happens. They have the main talk Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. What they don't tell you is all day Tuesday, they got 93 talks planned for you, you know. This class, this lunch, this meeting, this class, all day long. And so I tell Mario and Bobby, I'm not going to speak at any of these. I want you to. And I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. So they were nervous, especially Mario, but they get up and they do a very good job. And I'm in the back of the classroom, and their stories are just stories of torture and trauma and terror and damage and violence and every imaginable abuse. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance. Otherwise, you'd get scorched. So the nighttime talk comes, and I huddle with them. I said, look, I want you both to get out there before me and do a little 5-minute thing. And a little snapshot of your story, so that I can invite you to stand next to me at the end, and people will ask you questions. And they were nervous and terrified, especially Mario, but they said yes. So I do my 45 minutes or whatever, and then it's 2,000 people there. I mean, it was huge. And I said, yeah, so questions? Yes, ma'am. And a woman stands and she says, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out of the gate is for Mario. So Mario, and he's a tall drink of water, skinny guy, and he grabs the microphone. Yes, and he's just terrified. She goes, well, you say you're a father, and you have a daughter and a son. They're both about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? You know, what advice do you give them? Mario closes his eyes and he clutches the microphone, and I can feel him trembling standing next to me, and there's this overflow of emotion, but he wants to get this sentence out when suddenly he utters only, I just. As soon as he says those two words, he retreats back to his microphone clutching, closed-eyed retreat, and he trembles all the more, and I can feel that the emotions are starting to take him over. But he wants to get the sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands. And now it's her turn to cry. And she says, why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are gentle. You are kind. You are loving. You are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 2,000 total perfect strangers stand. And they will not stop crying. And all Mario can do is hold his face in his hands, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had chosen to return into himself. And they, in turn, returned to themselves, enlightened witnesses, every one of them. And I think that's the only praise God has any interest in. This exhausted God. And pretty soon you stand at the margins and you cease to care whether anyone accuses you of wasting your time. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Thank you very much. This will only work if you turn the lights up. Because it will require me to go, yes. Yes, sir. You know, but since I can't see you. So, house lights. Okay, there you go. Good, that's good enough. So, you go like this, I go like that, I'll repeat the question.
We've got an extra mic too.
Yeah, we don't need mics, just yell it out. The reason is, I once recently went to a thing where they all insisted they only had a mic and people had to come up and it was like, oh my gosh. So, if you go like this, it's way better. And any question will lead to a long ass answer. Yes?
How do you decide when to go out and try and find people and try and help people, and how do you decide when to wait and let them come to you?
We only wait. We don't go out anymore. So our place has evolved in 30 years. In the early days, Angel was running the streets. You know, these were my parishioners. They lived in the parish. I walked in the parish. I rode my bike in the parish. You know, this gang here, they all lived here, this gang here, they all lived in this part of the project. That's not true anymore. First of all, it's a commuter thing. They commute into this is my body. Well, you've never lived here a day in your life, So it evolved, so now we always say, in the old days, in my early years, I'd do peace treaties, ceasefires, truces. I don't regret that I did any of that, and I'd never do it again. So at Homeboy, we always say we don't work with gangs, we work with gang members. So it's a little bit like, it's exactly like recovery. We don't exist, we're not there for people who need help, we're only there for those who want it. So you have to walk through the door, otherwise it doesn't work. But once somebody walks through the door, it's kind of a red, the red carpet. And it's, something. That wasn't such a long-ass answer. Yes?
What motivated you to kind of take the initiative to start trying to make a change in their lives, and what was the first action you took, and how did you even decide hey, this is what I'm going to do to make a difference in their lives?
I don't really believe in making a difference in people's lives. I'll be honest with you. I was at a thing recently at a kind of young priests and newly ordained, and somebody was saying about them, these men just want to make a difference in people's lives. And I remember thinking in my head, I hope they get over that. Seriously. Because I think that's one of the things that gets in the way. Homeboy is like the University of Homeboy Industries. I just learned there. The original covenantal relationship says, God says, as I have loved you, you must have kind of a preferential, special care and love for the widow, orphan, and the stranger. And the reason God says that is because he knows that these are subgroupings of the poor. These are folks who know what it's like to have been cut off. And because they've suffered this particular pain, God thinks they're trustworthy guides to lead us to the kinship of God. That's important to me, because the minute it becomes me rescuing people, me saving people, a PBS reporter once ended an interview, said, how's it feel to have saved thousands and thousands of lives? And I go, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm not trying to be cute. A hardcore gang intervention worker in Houston, I'm going there tomorrow. I remember he really earnest guy, really good guy. He goes, how do you reach them? And I said, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? That's the only question that matters. Can you be reached by them? Because if you allow yourself to be reached, then it is an ennobling moment. We're in this exquisite mutuality where there is no us and them, there is no service provider, service recipient. I just want to make a difference in your life. No, you go there because you're selfish. I am. I go there because I need to have my heart altered. That's why I go. John Sobrino, the Jesuit theologian, liberation theologian, has a book provocatively titled, No Salvation Outside the Poor. And I know what he means. It's put yourself at the margins and watch what happens. You're not going there to make a difference. You're not going there to save anybody. You're not going there to rescue anybody. But if you go there, everyone gets rescued. It's how it works. So that's kind of maybe too fine a point, but it's because, I remember this happens all the time, a woman came and she wanted to volunteer at Homeboy Industries, and she says, I have to volunteer at Homeboy Industries. I said, why do you have to volunteer at Homeboy Industries? She says, because I believe I have a message these young people need to hear. I go, yikes! I said, do me a favor, the minute you lose that message, I hope you come back to us, because that's not the way it's supposed to work. Right now, we have the month of January, we have 3 seniors from Loyola High School doing their service project for the month. They don't go to school, they come to Homeboy. And they always say the same thing every year. We've been doing this for almost 20 years. What are we going to do here? I said, no, that's the wrong question. What's going to happen to you here? That's the question. So you want to get them past this thing where we're going to do something for you. Yes?
Thank you so much for sharing. I actually met Mario. He is very sweet. He has a really smile. My question is, what is your vision for Homeboy Industries in the next 10 years?
What's the vision for Homeboy Industries in the next 10 years or so? So,
Yeah.
we moved into our big headquarters where we currently, that's our 4th headquarters in our 30-year history in 2008. And it was then that we started to get requests from different cities, so delegations, stakeholders from Wichita. I remember Wichita was the first one. They'd show up, and we're going to hang out for 5 days, and we would like you to start a Homeboy in Wichita. So we had to think, do we want to do that? Do we want to become the McDonald's of gang intervention programs with over 5 billion gang members served? So we decided not to do that. Instead, we said, we're not going to franchise. What we want to do is we'll give you technical assistance. So rather than airlift Homeboy into Wichita, and Wichita would in turn say, well, what do you know about Wichita? And they'd be right. So we said, well, come and hang out and sort of glean the elements that you think you will want to start your own program. So now we have a thing which we call the Global Homeboy Network. So there are 141 programs in the United States modeled on Homeboy, and 15 programs outside the country. So we don't let them call themselves anything Homeboy Industries, although they can say on their material, a member of the Global Homeboy Network. So we have Braveheart Industries. That wasn't our name, but it was the folks in Glasgow called it. And it's all kind of the similar population. If it's not gang member, it's returning citizens. So we gather every August, and it's a nice thing. So people come at varying degrees of starting their project. A lot of them come and look and see, and one summer they come, and then the next summer they give a presentation on their progress. So it's shared, best practices and stuff. But it's kind of, if love is the answer, community is the context, but tenderness is the methodology. So these are kinds of principles of our Global Homeboy Network. Most folks start with a social enterprise, a business of some kind. For some reason, restaurants seem to be popular, I guess. But and then they add therapy, case management, that kind of thing. So it's nice. It's very heartening to kind of see the growth that's happened. Yes. So,
Is there any particular points at which you can tell somebody's basically opening up to a new type of life? If so, what does that point look like?
yeah, in recovery, they say it takes what it takes. It can be the death of a friend, the birth of a son, a long stretch in prison. It takes what it takes. No amount of me wanting that guy to have a life will ever be the same as that guy wanting to have a life. So and any parent who's ever dealt with a kid who's addicted to drugs, it's painful. But you wait. Ours is a God who waits, and who are we not to? So I had a homie named Danny who, maybe I'll end with this, I don't know, I don't want to overstay my welcome. But Danny, I met him when he was 13 years old, a knucklehead, a hard-hitting kid. And in fact, I only knew him in the streets, and once he declared to me, I promise you, I will never step foot in Homeboy Industries. I go, well, thank you for making my day, But I knew him everywhere in the streets, and juvenile hall, and probation camps. Finally, at 18, he went to prison, only for 2 years. And it takes what it takes. So when he gets out of prison, his thing was his mom, he discovers, has pancreatic cancer and 6 months to live. So, and he had an absolutely torturous relationship with this woman, which is why, of course, why kids are out on the streets, you know, it's despair, a darkness that they can't really see past, trauma and damage. They don't know how to transform their pain, so they keep transmitting it. And mental health issues. So those are the three profiles of kids who joined the gang, and this kid, Danny, was somewhere on the continuum of severity when it comes to all three of those things. But he had a torturous relationship with his mother, and but there he was, and I watched him with just the most extraordinary tenderness, and he became her hospice caregiver in the last days of her life. And he was so tender and gentle with her. And I watched him when I'd go over there many times to anoint her and visit him. And she died, and I buried her, and a week later he walked through the doors at Homeboy Industries. And I watched this kid, inhabit his truth and experience his own nobility. I watched him work side by side with guys I know he used to shoot at. I watched him laugh with his enemies. And a bond is born at Homeboy that's deeper than anything they've ever experienced in their families. So one day he comes into my office, and here's was his introduction to what he needed to tell me. What happened to me yesterday has never happened to me in my whole life. And so he tells me that he was on the Gold Line Chinatown stop, which was right in front of Homeboy, and he's heading east to go home at 5 o'clock after work. It's a packed train, but he's able to get a seat. Standing right in front of him, hanging onto a bar, a pole, was a guy. He says, he's medio pedo. He's a little bit drunk. And he could smell his breath, his alcohol. And he goes, he's a homie, but he's kind of older. I don't know him. I can see tattoos on his hand. And Danny is wearing a huge sweatshirt that says Homeboy Industries, jobs, not jails, covering his whole chest. And the medio pedo guy says, hey, you work there? And Danny doesn't know whether to engage him or not, so he just sort of nods. Is it any good? Danny shrugs and he says, it's helped me. In fact, I don't think I'll ever go back to prison because of this place. And then Danny stands and he fishes into his pocket and he finds a piece of paper. He finds a pen and he writes on this piece of paper the address at Homeboy Industries. And as he's telling me the story, he says, I couldn't believe I knew the address by heart. And so he hands it to the guy hanging onto the pole. And he says, call us. Come see us. We'll help you. And the man studies the piece of paper and he says, thank you. And the train stops and the guy gets off and Danny sits down. And then he repeats his earlier refrain. What happened to me yesterday has never happened to me in my life. Everyone on the train was looking at me. Everyone on the train was nodding at me. Everyone on the train was smiling at me. And for the first time in my life, I felt admired. And all I remember was the two of us, we just wept in my office. And I didn't do that for him. But he discovered that in that place. For only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing that world. Anyway, thank you all very much.